Hey everybody, and welcome to Coffin Talk, interviews with the living. Welcome to the 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning edition, even though you'll be hearing this whenever you feel like it. But we are a live weekly podcast. Well, I mean, we're recording live. Brought to you from Phoenix, Arizona, and broadcast all over the internet and the world. My name is Mike Oppenheim, and it is a pleasure to be interviewing Neil Matthews today. I feel like we're old friends because we met, I think, a month ago now. But we're both West Coast people, and he's lived in many locations, and I've lived in a few, and we have a lot in common. But this podcast is going to be about interviewing him about metaphysics, so I don't know how far we will or won't go into that area of his life. But he is also a podcast host. His podcast is remarkable. It's very different, and the spirit and the vibe behind it is genuine. That's a huge compliment. I can definitely tell you that if you check in and check out, there will be links to him. You'll be impressed. He has a different project and mission each season. And in addition to that, as you may be able to tell if you're watching the video feed, he has a slight affinity for the University of North Carolina's basketball program. He may or may not, it is rumored, have 45 plus pairs of shoes with their logos and decals on him. And he may or may not be wearing a North Carolina sweatshirt right now with about 55 different North Carolina things in his background. And that is, of course, awesome to me because I'm a huge sports fan and I'm also a metaphysical person, and so is he. And I've found this weird link with people. So that's about the most I'm going to be talking today. I'm going to throw the microphone over to Neil. Can you please tell us where were you born? What generation, if any, do you belong to? And how old are you?
All right. So generation may be the hard one. So let's see. I was born in 1980. I was born in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, which explains a lot of my affinity, which I do like that word. So I'm going to use it. Affinity to all things North Carolina. I currently have a U.S. flag and a North Carolina state flag underneath my U.S. flag, even though I live in Oregon. So I'm going to just let that sit on the table for a second for someone. So being born in Camp Lejeune, I drank the water. That's a big thing. So yes. So to answer those questions, yes, I did drink the water. Let's see, what else did you ask me? So I don't like guessing.
Maybe you don't remember because you drank the water in Camp
Because I probably drank the water, right? And I'm drinking water now, and it is well water. So there's that.
What generation, if any?
I don't know what generation I am. I struggle with that. I'm Gen Z. I don't know. I don't subscribe to that stuff. So I don't.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of why I ask it. If you do subscribe, I'm always interested, and if you don't subscribe, I'm interested. So it's like both answers are interesting to me.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Somebody tell us the answer to that, because I really don't know. Like I don't get into that.
Yeah, and I wasn't getting into it until I was constantly being told that I'm in a generation, and I kept being told I'm in two different ones, and then I kept being told to act like one or the other, and I'm not like you. I just so to me, I'm intrigued by this obsession in America. It's not even in other countries with trying to divide us, not just by class, not just by ethnicity, but now they've added this new fun thing, which isn't even like strictly age. It's a generation, and like we're supposed to clash.
I will say this: I'm not from the greatest generation ever. How about that?
Yeah. Awesome. There's another Camp Lejeune joke somewhere in that. I don't even know how to make it, but actually, yeah, and let's segue into that. So, I think I remember this correctly, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. But your father was military?
Yeah. Okay. He retired as a United States Marine in 92 ish. And then we moved to Oregon, and I've been here ever since. And I had aspirations when I was in high school, middle school and high school, to leave. I hated Oregon. I don't know why. I just didn't like it. It was in California, which is where I liked the most of all the places we were. And then, God put a woman in my life in high school, and, we met at 16, 17 and never looked back. And we've been together ever since. And now her job will keep us here, which kind of sucks, but I mean, it's a great job, and it's opened a lot of doors for us financially. And, I can't complain about that. So
yeah, that's interesting. I'm kind of locked into Phoenix. My wife and I both have parents here, and we both decided to stay here and help our parents, through life. And it's weird because like I definitely don't love Phoenix, so I feel the same way. I'm like kind of jumping to leave, and then we have like 2 young kids, and they love being in Phoenix because they don't know any different or better. So it'll be interesting as time goes on. I would like to ask you, it's not cliche coming from me, because I'm celebrating my 5th wedding anniversary in 5 days. Very happily remarried, but I also went through a divorce. So I'm curious, when you meet young people who want to get married at a young age, so like high school lovers and stuff, do you have any like desire to encourage them or to discourage them? Like, do you have any like weird opinions on that? Because it worked out for you. So
it did work out. So that's interesting you'd bring that about, because for many years I started in youth ministry when I was 19. So I saw a lot of young kids in the church, growing up in the church myself. And recently we go to a different church than I grew up in. And a lot of young people are getting married in our church. And I've been asked to do a DJ thing for them for their wedding or whatever. And I always ask them, like, because I don't know, I'm a little out of touch in that arena, I feel like, of how old people are. And they'll say to me, oh, we're 20 something. And I'm like, ooh. And they're like, what? And I was like, nothing. My wife and I were 20 and 21. And then I always think to myself, was I that young and dumb? And my mom reminds me, yeah. And I'm like, no, I wasn't. Elizabeth and I were way more mature than that. I don't think we were. So I'm never going to discourage someone to get married. My only thing that I will say is, do you love them? Will you support them? And it will be hard, because I do think, 2 people growing together. We were talking about this actually, ironically, last night with my daughter. She has a guy she's interested in, and we've made jokes about them getting married, just jokes, nothing serious, because there isn't even an official thing, which I don't even get, but whatever. But I said to her, and my wife and I both said, it's really hard when you get married, because you're marrying a completely, in a lot of cases, different person than yourself. And you have to learn to grow with them. You have to learn their likes, their dislikes. And so I'm never going to discourage someone to get married. I think marriage is the most amazing thing on the planet, but do it for the right reason. And if you really are, passionate about being together, don't lose that passion, and don't let someone talk you out of said passion.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And what you just heard, everyone, is kind of what I was trying to explain about the genuineness behind his podcast. And I'm bringing that up because I want to ask you a little bit about your podcast. Normally, I wouldn't do this, because while I do respect and love everyone's individual programs and podcasts, most casual listeners actually don't want to hear about that. But they just want to see a podcast or listen to it. But with yours in particular, there's like a driving mission behind it, and it seems very sincere to me. It felt sincere. It is sincere. I know it is, and I know you well enough now to say this. So I'm curious, what was scarier, being sincere, like for real, in front of like audiences and having that grow, or accepting that like that's who you are? Like, I know both are hard in our society, especially for guys of our age.
I would say, both equally. As doing my show is really hard. It just is. The conversations seem to get harder. The people seem to get more real and authentic. I had a lady actually we were sitting with yesterday, because I recorded yesterday around this time, and she felt really bad because she was in North Carolina. I was like, don't feel bad. Kind of my rhythm and routine. But she had some horrific stuff happen to her. And she started crying, and we got done, and she said, I didn't think I was going to go there. I didn't expect to have that happen. Is that normal for you? And I wanted to be polite and say, yeah, that's kind of how that happens. It's just magic, or I don't know, the synergy, whatever it is. I don't have a articulation or an adjective for that. I said, it just happens. People just do that. And the flip side of that for me is I try to mirror whatever is happening. So if somebody's giving something, I try to equally give something, so they don't feel they're alone in that. And I think that can be hard, because again, I have to do what I'm, promoting and practicing. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, the name of your podcast is literally about walking in the other footsteps, right. And,
other people's shoes. Yeah.
Yeah. Other people's shoes. Sorry. You can't walk in footsteps.
You can, but, Yeah.
And So for me, like I've always been a sincere, nice guy, but I was hiding it for many years and I was trying to downplay it. And then I had like a life changing event with my son, which people who listen to this are probably so tired of hearing. So I will just briefly gloss over that. But the point being, that really changed me because I realized, oh, like the world needs people who are kind and it needs people to step up and step into situations where people are hurting who just want to like let them know I'm here for you. I don't have advice. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Because that's for me what helped the most was just people showing me that they love me. Like, hey, no judgment, no questions, no like desire to hear the full story. I just want to visit you. I love you. I've known you for years. Like, this is hard, like what you're going through. And so I feel like your show is almost an attempt to do that with strangers, but then for an audience that you're building who aren't strangers. So, like, you're building rapport with an audience while simultaneously building rapport with a guest each week. And in that process, with the word sincerity, like I was saying, like something magical develops. But I'm curious if you felt that at the start. Like, was that the like the gunpowder that like shot you into this career?
Well, I think it didn't at first. I just really wanted to understand. I think was the first kind of, if we're going to put it in a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe a movie, the first scene, perhaps. The thing for me is when I first started, I just thought, I'm curious about their perspective. I'm curious about what happened. And then from there, I think it was around season 2, we talked about people leaving the church. And I have my own church leaving story.
Which I am going to ask you to tell, by the way.
So. Okay. and that was awful. And I kept hinting around about why. I kept hinting around like Hansel and Gretel, like, here's the pebbles to get back home. And then finally, it was like this great reveal of why I left. And I had people come up to me saying, I never knew you dealt with that. Thank you for sharing that. And I thought, wait, there's power in me sharing what I've walked through. There's power in me knowing that and sharing that. And again, not that I ever wanted to make it about me, because I don't. When I first started the show, the artwork we chose doesn't even have my picture on it. And I went to some mastermind thing because I was so geeked out about, getting feedback, because I'd never done this before. So I wanted that feedback. Am I doing it right? And I had a panel of 3 people look at my logo virtually, by the way, because it was during COVID. And somebody said, your name needs to be bigger. I said, okay. We're making notes. Name needs to be bigger. And then it said, one person said, your picture's not even on here. And I said, there's a reason for that. I said, okay. And the next person said, I don't like the font color. I don't like light blue. I was like, well, that's not leaving. So there. I said, I don't want my name to be bigger because it's not about me. That's why my picture's not on there. That's why it just says other people's shoes. And then the last lady, they circled back to her and she said, I really don't like the disgusting pair of shoes. They're ugly. And I said, tell me, you don't have to share details, but is there things in your life that were ugly? Is there things in your life that you're not proud of? Is there things in your life that were messy and you're like, I don't want to think about that? And she goes, well, yeah. And I said, that's what those shoes represent. Life is not pretty. Life is not Hallmark. Life is definitely not Disney. There's things that people have walked through that are horrific. I've talked to rape victims. I've talked to people who've had their family members murdered. I've talked to teen suicide, parents that have had their kids commit suicide. I mean, it's not pretty out there, folks. It's not. Get off my lawn, I feel like. But the thing about it is when I think to those shoes, I mean, if I was going to line up the pairs of shoes, first off, I'd have to get a pretty big room because we've had a number of episodes now, 300 plus. It would be a lot, but each shoe, each person, each conversation, it has been so life-changing for me. And people always ask me, well, how many people do you listen every week? I said, well, I know of 2. They're like, 2? I was like, well, sometimes me, if I really like the guest, I want to hear him again. So there's the one. And the second one that I know of every week is my wife. And she's pretty good about giving feedback. Every now and then I'll ask her, hey, what'd you think of so-and-so? They were all right. They were okay. I really didn't like that you said this part. Okay, fair enough.
That's cool though.
So that to me is where it's at. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you definitely did. And yeah, my question was there like a life-changing event or a series of events? And no, you totally answered it. And that's actually part of the more compelling like reason I'm asking these kind of questions is, so now we're going to get into faith and we're going to get into like your experience. So the main point of this podcast is, and at some point you can answer it yourself or I will ask you directly, what do you think happens when you die? But before we get into that, we need to first know the story of how you became a person who even has that opinion. So let's just start with early childhood until the day you did quit the church. What church, how long, and what commitment, like that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I started out as an Awana kid. For those that have been in the church, they kind of know what that is. It's like Cub Scouts for church people. You get badges and it's based on you memorizing Bible verses, and then you go every week and same to an adult. And they sign off saying you did this verse. So that was kind of how I got my, I guess, introduction into church. And then during that process, they call it walk the aisle. Again, I'm using church terms. If you've been around the church, you know these. If you don't, then you can go look them up. But I walked the aisle. I went down in front, prayed a sinner's prayer, something to the effect of, Jesus, come into my life. I'm a horrible person. I've done all these sins. I'm 9 at the time, roughly. And then shortly after that, I got baptized in front of the whole church. The whole reason why I wanted to get baptized is, you could probably guess it, it was in front of the church. And I thought that was a cool thing to do and didn't really know what I was doing. The pastor did say to me, how long could I hold my breath? And I thought, that's an odd question for a 9-year-old, 8-year-old. And he said, well, my wife's been in your Sunday school class. I know you've done a lot of bad things. I think he meant to be funny, but I didn't take it as that as a child. And I thought all the sin was going to come off of me. So the water was going to turn black. Like, I'm very imaginative. Even as a child, I was very imaginative. I had a pretty big imagination. Anyway, and so then none of those things happened, obviously. It was up and down and, it was fine. But, fast forward, I spent my years in middle school going to church. I was very depressed as a child, very suicidal in middle school. When I was in 5th grade, my cousins, who were living in Portland, Oregon at the time, came to live with us in California. They were being sexually abused and neglected by their dad, and so they were removed from the home. So they became siblings, basically. And so I went from just my brother telling me what to do, to the girls telling me what to do, to my mom telling me what to do, to my dad when he was home telling me what to do. And so I grew up kind of feeling left out and lost, especially from 5th grade on. I remember distinctly feeling nobody even cares that I'm here anymore. We moved to Oregon, as I mentioned already, and my parents bought a house and we were all excited. We were going to get our own rooms. My brother got his room downstairs. There was an upstairs, and the girls got the upstairs, and it looked like an apartment because there was like a living room area and a bathroom up there. And I don't think my parents counted math correctly because shocker, didn't have a room.
That's literally unbelievable to me because I have kids. I cannot imagine just forgetting Emily and
right. So we found this room off of, we'll call it the living room upstairs, just for conversation's sake. And in this room, there was the heater and the heating elements and the heating ducts and everything was all in there. And so those who are AC people kind of can understand what I'm saying. Anyway, it was this horseshoe of a room. And at the end of the horseshoe, there was this kind of storage area. So that's where my bed was. And then I'd have to literally walk around the horseshoe to get out of the room. And one day my dad was telling somebody at work about me being in this room. And he said, this coworker said, you can't have your kid in that room. There's natural gas in that room. It's not good for him. Why? He can't be in there. And I'd been in there, I don't know, probably 6-8 months. So
with your jug of Camp Lejeune water.
Yeah. So again, the water and the ace, I don't know. It's a lot of things I've been ingesting, clearly. I don't need to do drugs. I've done enough. So they felt bad about that. And so they built me this, and I kid you not, in the living room, again, upstairs living room with plywood, they made me this kind of paneled room.
Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
I had no door. I used a Mexico blanket with the tassels on the end as like this curtain as my door. And that's where I lived. And no real, walls or privacy per se, just this plywood. So that was fun. Yeah. So again, feeling very validating my feelings of not feeling like you had your own room, you had your own space, you had your own, area that you could go and debrief or get space from. So that was growing up a little bit of mixed in with church. So church came along and I glommed onto it because it was the first time I felt seen and validated and, important, and I had a place. And so I grew up through the youth group ranks, in leadership, and I could speak. I was articulate. I knew the Bible really well, again, from those Awana years, pretty good memorizers. So, I was like shooting like this rocket in this trajectory. And, people would come along and say to me, well, you're the next Joel Osteen. And at the time, I thought that was a compliment. Now I think it's an insult.
Yeah, it's like a weird.
There's that. It's like, like water again, back to the water thing. Seems to be a recurring joke. But anyway, so, I rise up through the ranks. My senior year of high school, my youth leader steps away, leaves his wife actually for a girl in our youth group, which is a whole nother story for an old nother time. And the church came to me and was like, listen, we want you to just get us through the summer. You've been leading already. We can see that. Just get us through the summer. I'm 19. I had just graduated high school and I'm being asked to lead basically my peers, essentially. A lot of them were, which was weird. You go from we're friends to now, no, I'm the leader. Now I'm the one in charge. No, you can't do that anymore. I know we used to like hide out and do dumb things. We can't do that anymore. We went to California, to Great America. I couldn't even rent the van for the church because I wasn't 25.
Wow.
I had to find somebody to rent the van so we could go to California on this youth trip. So that was fun. So, just growing up and doing those things and, being married, I wasn't even married. So I wasn't even married yet because I was 19. So I get married along the way. I go to school. The church sent me to school. It was this remote school. So I did everything basically online. I would write papers, send them to Colorado, which is their headquarters. They would evaluate them and then pass me or fail me on these classes. So it was a 3-year track. I did it in 4 years. I'm not a great student. This lady, Debbie, who was amazing, came along and basically tutored me. She would read all the material because I suffer from dyslexia, again, result of the water, most likely. And so through that process, I get credentialed, I get licensed. And the whole time, my wife and I are trying to build our life together, build a youth group. At the highest, the youth group was about 40 kids, 40, 50 kids, pretty regularly on Wednesdays and, major events. And so, life is good. Got our first house along the way. And then, like in every guy's life, there's things in our life that just re-show up again. It's like, oh, hey, you were dealing with that. You were good with that. And it showed up again. And that was pornography. And so for me, I battled it all through high school. I battled it most of my, middle school years even. That's really where it started. And in that process, I went to the church to confess that I had seen some recently after an Easter event that we had. And my wife had found it and said, you need to tell somebody or I'm going to tell them, kind of basically. And so anyway, so I go and I tell the church and they immediately send me home for the day. Cause again, I'm on staff now. So that's like my job. So I go home for the day and, my wife was like, well, what are we going to do? She had left the night before. She was so angry. She had taken our daughter and left the night before when she had found everything. But she'd come back that morning, said, hey, you got to get help. And I said, hey, I understand if you want to leave. And she's like, no, if I wanted to leave, I would never have come back. I love you. I want to see you get help, which I think even in that moment said a lot.
Yeah.
She could have left and it would have been okay. So anyway, fast forward, I ended up losing my job. I I ended up getting removed from all leadership positions. And then I work about a year to come back to get restored in our faith. And in that, the whole time I'm thinking, there's something wrong here. I don't want to be here anymore. And so I actually prayed and fasted, which wasn't my custom in those days. And I prayed for 3 days and fasted for 3 days. And I came to the conclusion through a series of weird events that I needed to go. I needed to move on. And the church we attend now is called New Beginnings, ironically enough. And I've been serving in youth ministry for on and off for like the last 10 years or so. So
that's incredible. I'm sorry if you're watching.
Okay. I was like, are you all right?
I have allergies.
So many times.
Phoenix, Arizona is really weird. And in the winter here, I get allergies. And
it's like, man, he's really crying over my story.
No, it's crazy. Yeah, no, it looks completely. It actually was a really good story, and I have 3 kind of follow-up questions for you.
Yeah, you're good.
First of all, my favorite
version. That was the fast version.
Yeah. Well, my favorite part of the story is the part where your wife returns and talks to you about it and says, "Get help," because that's actually the solution to all problems in the world. And every single person listening, that's all you need to know. Problem with your daughter, problem with your wife, problem with yourself. Come to the person, talk about it, and offer a path to. Yeah. So like, I really feel like right now, especially what's going on in America and across the world, as far as like conflict and like one of us has to win, the other must like perish. That's the opposite of what he just said and what you just said. And I just want to point that out that, and also to put myself, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, she's amazing.
Yeah.
And to me, you know, when I think about her being, you know, doing something to me that may hurt or whatever, that may hurt my feelings or may do something that I don't like, I always think back to, she hasn't hurt you as bad as you've hurt her. And I know that's maybe bad or warped, whatever, but that truly is how I feel. Like, I think, okay, that's not as bad as what you did to her. You should be able to forgive her because she's forgiven you for a lot.
And like, what we do and don't forgive and what hurts us is arbitrary at best. I mean, there's no actual reason, good or bad, to be hurt. And it's a whole weird thing that we go through. But I know like this is petty and stupid, but my feelings get hurt like if my wife leaves like a stack of dishes at the end of the night when I go to sleep before her, because I get up early and I clean the house and like set it up, and like that's so stupid because I love my wife and I said till death do us part and through better, you know, like I could just do the dishes, it doesn't matter. And like I'm bringing this up because I'm trying to show like from big, you know, offense to small, what I love about that story literally is that your wife is a person who came into your life when your family wasn't doing what a traditional American boy expects their family to do, which is give them a room and treat them equal to their brother, and even if not equal to, at least, you know, or I'm sorry, if not more than at least equal to cousins. So, but I don't know your parents, and I haven't walked in their shoes, and like, you know, I don't know.
I think they did the best they could with what they had. I mean, they were both very hurting people. They both came from very hurting growing up years. My mom's dad died when she was 6 months old. She was told her whole life, you know, that it was her fault that her dad died. And so, you know, that is a huge burden to carry around. My dad was physically, mentally, emotionally abused by his father, drunk, gambling addiction. And so he would beat my grandmother. My dad saw that, witnessed that. And so, you know, they both came from very hurting years. And so what do two people do that are hurting? They probably get together and do more hurting, is my Dr. Phil diagnosis, by the way.
No, that's cool. And it's good that you have that much compassion and that much awareness. And it's also weird because, again, like, it's weirder, to me at least, it's weirder to psychoanalyze all this stuff when you're in the middle, when you have children and you're married and you still have parents like that. It's very different from when you're just a child without any skin in the game. But it's also like interesting because sometimes I worry I'm actually too soft with my children, which is like a weird thing to think. Like, how could you be too soft in a world where we're supposed to love, love, love? But at the same time, I want to prepare my children for the not soft bullies that like they'll inevitably encounter in this world. And so it's like, as a father, I want to build up a tough shell, but I also know that I hate my tough shell. We just talked about how like sincere you are and how much I didn't like pretend, you know, and I wasn't like fake. I just I was like quieter about sharing what I was going through, and so are people like you and everyone, and we all play this tap dance. My question, to go back to your story though, is were you fearing the judgment of God about the pornography, or were you fearing, like, what was the ultimate fear in that? Like sin. Can you explain like your
Yeah,
fear of it? Yeah.
sure. I don't think I ever feared God's judgment, as weird as that sounds. I think I was strong enough and still am strong enough in my faith that no matter what I've done, God isn't necessarily happy with it, to be clear, but he doesn't love me any less. It's a weird thing to think about, but that's where I'm at. Is God's going to love me no matter what I am and what I do. He's just maybe not thrilled with what I'm doing. Like, as an example, if I went and cheered for the University of Duke right now, I think a lot of people would think I'm crazy. They would think they probably wouldn't be very happy. I know my wife wouldn't be, because I've spent a lot of money on Carolina, merch. She'd be like, "What is going on with you?" Some people may not even be happy, because that's my identity has been wrapped into my fandom, per se. But that doesn't change my relationship with them, if that's a weird way to maybe segue it. But I was never fearful of God being mad at me. However, I didn't want to tell anybody, because I knew I was going to probably lose something. I just didn't know what. I was very fortunate to not lose my marriage. That was the first thing I thought I would lose, is I would lose my marriage. I had a feeling I was probably going to lose my job. And I had a feeling it was going to be super humbling. And all those things happened, except losing my marriage. So
that's incredible. And especially like public humiliation or humbling, like yeah, no, that's, yeah.
It's the worst, by the way. I don't recommend it. No, actually, I do recommend it. You should say it to a more trusted brother than maybe your church leadership staff. So
I was kicked out of a fraternity in college, and I feel a similar vibe. It's just a different experience, and the reason why was ludicrous. I was investigating their insurance policy with the national board, so it's like an even weirder like thing, because I was trying to expose something and then the fallout. But the point is, the shame, the ostracization, the fear of it coming out, even though you wanted it to come out, and like, there's just like that, like, I mean, you do want your biggest secrets out there, because you'll sleep better, but you don't want them out there. And that's my last question about this, and then I do want to hear what you think happens when you die. But in an alternate universe where you feel no shame for pornography and your wife doesn't judge you for it and you don't care, do you think you would have found a different forbidden fruit to be seeking and then have learned the same lesson?
Yes. So now, I mean, this has been what, 20 something years now. I mean, it was 08. So is that 20 years?
Almost 20 years. Yeah. Almost.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the math. So I have thought for years now, because again, reflection and time to reflect and time to look back. I think the pornography wasn't the issue. In fact, I went to counseling for a year, almost a year and a half. My counselor said to me, "Listen, Neil, you don't have a porn issue. You have, I bet you can guess it, an anger issue." And I said, "What?" And he said, "You're angry and you're hurt, and you're using porn as a drug to release the anger and the hurt. We need to get to the root issue of why you're hurting, of why you're rejected. You go there to take away those feelings, like an alcoholic would go drink, or a gambler would go gamble, or a drug user would go use drugs, or somebody that beats somebody else, like a wife, or, the husband to go beat his wife. That's what you do. That's your outlet. Some people go shoot things or blow things up or hit a golf ball. You go to porn." And I go, "Yeah, why can't I go do the golf ball thing? That sounds way more fun." And he said, "I don't know. That's what we got to figure out." And he was very gracious. His name's Jeff. Very gracious along the way. Actually wrote me a letter telling the church exactly that, a little more detail with a little more clinical stuff. But he said he doesn't have a porn issue, he has an anger issue. So I have to be mindful when I do get angry and I do get upset and I do kind of like to see things spiral, or I get really sad at times. I have to be very careful of guests, even if they get really sad and I don't take on their emotion. I have that tendency sometimes to be very mindful of when I get in those sad moments, those Eeyore days, to not go back to, acting out again.
It's incredible. It's really well articulated, by the way. Thank you. You're really good at explaining this because I think people listening are just going to get a lot from this because I think, especially naming drugs, alcohol, gambling, violence, like I just feel like there's this weird. I remember once a counselor. I wasn't seeing her as a counselor, but she was like speaking to a group, and it blew my mind when she said, "Raise your hand if you think it's worse to be a drug addict or to abuse like your kids." And like half the room, like raised their hand for one, and half the other. And I was just appalled because I was like, who cares if you're a drug addict, if you're hitting, like, and then she's like, and who cares if you're apathetic versus you do drugs? And I was like, who cares about either? And her point was she kept listing things and we just judge different mistakes differently, but they're really, at the end of the day, is what you said, which is they're all escapes or distractions or some excuse to not deal with our hurt, which comes before the anger usually. I think always, but I'm not a psychologist, but I'm pretty sure you're hurt first and then you're angry after you're hurt. And I think that's, for me, that's important because I get hurt and then I have like a split second before I get angry. And that's like a huge split second for me. I have to really monitor that. And if I just say I'm hurt, I won't start the anger train, which then is going to lead to me having to apologize for my anger, even though the original affront was actually my issue. So I've learned that the hard way. And luckily when I get angry, I like sulk and go away. So I'm very lucky. I'm not like a dangerous person when I'm angry, at least, in the traditional sense. But I relate a lot to your story because that's like just always been my thing, is like feeling unappreciated or unwelcome and then just escaping, even though that feeling it's made up, I mean, for sure, but it does come from childhood. So I am curious, you have a lot of confidence in God. You use the name, you evoke it regularly in a good way. I'm not, I'm just summarizing my opinion of your personality. So with that said, what do you think happens when you die? And has that ever shifted, or has your whole life, have you felt a complete confidence in this?
So I would say, yes, I felt a complete confidence in it. I'm not sure exactly what happens. I mean, I know what I've read in the Bible and I believe what I've read in the Bible. But I always think in the back of my mind, what if they're wrong? And it's not like a deconstruction of my faith or anything like that for those of my family that may choose to listen to this. I don't know. But I would say this. I will say what I hope it is. How about that? Mm-hmm. What I hope it is that, and I'll use myself. I hope that I go to sleep one night and not wake up. That's my hope. And that when I do open my eyes, that I'm in the presence of, in my mind, what Jesus looks like. And I can't even articulate that because I've let media and everything influence that view of him. But probably the closest truly is the show The Chosen. Jonathan, and I don't know his last name, but his first name is Jonathan, and he plays Jesus. That's what I envision now. So he's my new Jesus that I picture, and he does a great job as Jesus. Any event, I hope that I open my eyes and Jesus is there to maybe lift me out of my like laying on the ground kind of position by hand. And as he's lifting me up from the ground, I notice his hands have been scarred from the nail marks. And I notice, somehow his side is exposed and I see the spear mark where he was stabbed with the spear. And I notice he's not wearing shoes because for whatever reason, those are the things I notice most about people first is their eyes and their shoes. And so I notice he's not wearing shoes and he welcomes me. He gives me a hug that I've never encountered or experienced before. And then I say, I want to see my granny. And he says, okay, let's go see her. And he said, she's right over here. She wants to talk to you. That's what I would love to have happen. I don't read that in my Bible. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what I want to have happen. I hope he's hearing me, which I believe he hears me in everything. So maybe you can make that happen, big guy.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I like that, how you explain that. And also I think, you're a good balance, in my opinion, especially in the year 2025, where a lot of people fear religious people in our country. They just do. They like buck like at the thought of it because they not only saw but experienced what the power of a movement can do with like government and politics. And yet, and this is the thing I've learned, the best lesson I've learned from 200 and something 20 episodes of this podcast, I've yet to meet a single religious person who reminds me of the stereotype of American religious people. And so I know they exist. I'm not dumb, and I know that they do vote, and I know that there's a huge, but it's very different to hear you explain it because you said, well, I've never read that in the Bible. Like, I don't actually know, but this is like my faith. So I really noticed with you an intersection of a deep, profound faith in your experience versus like helping a scaffolding book and movement like with your life. And so breaking away from that and being yourself matters more to me than following that, but using that as like a scaffold of something to like build your life around makes sense to me. So the older I get and the more I do this podcast, the more I see why religion was founded and why movements start and why people subscribe to them. And I also see the beauty in people just being like, oh, this is mine and that's yours and we're fine, because no one cares about convincing someone. Like, you couldn't even convince everyone within your own church of your vision of what happens when you die, which is my whole point. Like, you probably both agree that Jesus is a part of it, but you know, what his role is, what his function is, what he looks like, how he behaves. And also, the older I get, the more I just really become obsessed with why Jesus was lauded and famous, and then what's happened since. Like, what he represented was the opposite of a lot of the usages of his name. And you're not one of these people. And so thank you. I like to try to wrap up and summarize my take as a not atheist at all, a hugely believing in like a very profound, bigger picture to all of this. But I'm mystified. I'm dumbfounded. I don't understand, nor do I think I will. So I love your vision of the afterlife. And as we run out of time, I always let my guests have the last word. So I would just love to give you whatever you want to say to my audience. And there will be notes for how to find your podcast, because some people think I'm asking you to plug your podcast. You may plug your podcast. I'm not telling you can't, but I just want you to know I'm looking for something you just really want to share, like some wisdom you might have.
Well, I would just say for me, Jesus is my everything. My wife is super important to me. My daughter. You know, there's a lot of things in my life that are super important, but when I get down to the essence of who I am, I'm not here without him. And so every day, I actually came across the passage a couple of years ago that talked about in Peter walking in his footsteps. And I changed my signature line in everything I send out, show related or even personally related, that says in his sandals. Because I wanted that constant reminder of seeing it every day. Am I in his sandals? Am I walking in his footsteps? Am I having compassion for people? Am I loving people the best I have? Am I giving enough grace here? Am I? And that may sound religious. That may sound legalistic, but it's not. It's just the mindset of saying, am I doing my best to represent the man who I believe changed my life forever?
That is incredible. I agree with you. I actually straight up agree, which is like really often I'm just like, could I be more compassionate and could I extend more grace? And it really is. And it's especially, I keep saying this to people, every year I'm alive, it gets more intense. It's probably social media. It's probably a misperception, but there feels to be more intensity going on, more strong opinions and more conflict. And I think what you just said is the solution to all of that, which is just like, it's so weird because I'm a fake like Jewish kid from Berkeley, California, but I actually believe like what would Jesus do is like a great shortcut advice line.
I have it on my bracelet.
Yeah. And
it's light blue, so of course.
Of course it is. And it's just funny because like growing up, nothing would have made me go like, bleh. Like I would have thought it was so corny that I would be saying this and saying it sincerely. And so thank you. I really appreciate you, Neil. And this is just the beginning of our friendship. So I know I'll be seeing you again, but
Mike's a great guy, guys. Listen to his show. You can listen to mine, but Mike probably has a better show. So listen to his.
I don't know. I just know that we're on the exact same mission, which is honestly like dance like no one's watching, but hope that the people who do watch are getting something good out of it. You know, I just want
good analogy.
Yeah. So thank you again, again, Neil. Thank you to everyone who is at home watching or listening. And as always, you can head over to mikeyop.com. That's MIKEYOPP.com and sign up for my service, which provides you with fiction, nonfiction, podcasts, and other bonus content. And once again, you have been listening to Coffin Talk. My name is Mike Oppenheim, and we will see you soon.